Hello, everybody. Welcome to MicroStrategy World 2021. Today, we are here to talk about MicroStrategy's journey towards containerization. Myself, Shreya Shah, I'm a principal product owner at MicroStrategy. Along with me, I have Jay Shah, who is a senior software architect at MicroStrategy.
Thank you, Shreyas. Excited to be here.
All right, let's quickly go over the current MicroStrategy deployment options. Option number one is our MicroStrategy Enterprise platform. This is our traditional install where a customer goes to our download sites, grabs the installation, gets their own hardware, installs MicroStrategy on top of it. Customers in charge of upgrades, maintenance, migration, backups, and the whole 9 yards. Uh, all the day-to-day operations are maintained and managed by the customer itself. Option number two is MicroStrategy in public cloud. This is similar to option number one. The only difference here being MicroStrategy is being installed on one of the public cloud providers like Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud. The customer is still in charge of installing, upgrading, scaling, migrating, and all the day-to-day operations like backups and security scans. So as you see, it's still a lot of work which is on the customer. The next option we have is MicroStrategy Cloud Enterprise. So this is hosted by MicroStrategy. We deliver business intelligence as a service, providing comprehensive functionalities for enterprise analytics. Everything here you see in the last option is MicroStrategy responsibility. We will take care of your environment. We will make sure it's upgraded. We'll make sure it's backed up. We'll make sure we have security scans done and the whole 9 yards that you would do in your own data center or in your own public cloud. Our cloud, MicroStrategy Cloud Enterprise, is configured for high performance and consistent reliability. Along with this, it's also extremely secure with a robust framework. We have a bunch of security certifications like HIPAA, SOC 2 Type 2, PCI, and we also provide physical, technical, and operational controls to ensure your sensitive data remains secure. So how did we get here? So I'll go over evolution of computing. On the left-hand side, you see a traditional VM deployment. VM are an infrastructure level construct to turn on one machine into many servers. It contains one physical server and can have multiple VMs on top of a server. Later, it came along your virtualized deployment. So virtualized deployment would be your VMwares of this world. You could even call the public clouds as your virtualized deployment because you are in charge of the EC2 instance at the top. The entire guest operating system will require one VM. Application portability in virtualized deployment is not guaranteed. That requires a lot of work you need to do if you want to migrate from one application to the from one VM to another. And that's where we get into a container deployments. So what is a container, right? Container, as I said, VM is infrastructural construct. You can call container as application level construct. On a container, you package your entire software and all its dependencies together, and you just deploy it on your operating system. One or many containers can share one operating system. Containers also provide security by isolation from one app to another. The great point about containers is you just package it and you can deploy it on any major Linux or Windows platform. The next, I would like to talk about some of the deployment trends and what we have seen at MicroStrategy as well. It's an industry trend, right? Everybody wants to move to cloud, and containerization is right behind cloud. We have seen 90% of organizations are already leveraging cloud in one form or another. But what it means is 90% of the companies have some sort of footprint in any of the three major cloud providers. By 2021, we feel that based on the market research, 75% of the cloud workflows would be SaaS applications. Internal to MicroStrategy, we have also seen a 38% year-over-year growth of customers migrating to MicroStrategy Cloud Enterprise. So on the basis of this, if you've been following latest announcements from MicroStrategy, we have recently announced Hyper.Now. What is Hyper.Now? Hyper.Now is our SaaS product designed to empower your entire organization with hyper intelligence in a matter of few minutes. We've built Hyper.Now from the ground up with containerized backend, and the infrastructure is completely robust and elastic. Hyper.Now also leverages all the security and scalability that makes MicroStrategy the best in the class for all analytics. Let me show you a quick demo of Hyper.Now. So as you see here, I'm at microstrategy.com/hyperintelligence. I accept all the terms and conditions. As you see, I have already got an environment. You will receive an email with to the account that you have signed in with, and that email will include all the details about Hyper.Now. You download Workstation. If you don't know what Workstation is, you can use Workstation to manage your MicroStrategy environments as well as create content. Once Workstation is installed, you click on the tray app will show up. You click on open. As you see, as soon as you click open, you are already connected to your environment. We have also provided you sample hypercards, which you can start playing with. If you want, you can also connect to any cloud hosted data sources. So I made it sound easy, and it is actually easy. In a matter of minutes, you can go from deploying to creating content without having to go through the pain of installing, configuring MicroStrategy. All right. So where does this put us now? So now I already showed you our three offerings: the MicroStrategy Enterprise Platform, MicroStrategy on Cloud, and MicroStrategy Cloud Enterprise. Hyper.Now is another MicroStrategy managed infrastructure. As I mentioned, it's a SaaS platform, and MicroStrategy will take care of everything, including upgrading your environments too. This platform is going to be always upgraded, so there is no hassle for a customer to worry about upgrading. We'll back it up. We will patch it. We will ensure that it's completely secure and your data is completely secure as well. So those are the current deployment options. Now, I would like to pass it on to Jay Shah, who will go into details about how Hyper.Now has been built. So on to you, Jay.
Thank you, Shreyas. That was great. Hyper.Now is an exciting new offering that we have, and I'll further talk about the underlying technology stack and the deployment architecture. Now, considering that this session is about containerization, it shouldn't be surprising that containers are the technology that's driving this new offering. Now, first step to containerization is building a self-contained application with all of its related dependencies, such as configuration files, libraries, operating system, and so on, into a package which is called an image to provide a consistent runtime environment. And Docker is certainly a popular tool to create those containerized images. Now, once you have number of containers for your microservices, you need an easier way to deploy and manage your application. And Kubernetes is an open source container orchestration system for automating the deployment, management, and scaling. What you need to do is you can create a Kubernetes cluster and deploy your MicroStrategy within that. And Kubernetes management layer will make sure that your application is always running. Now, if you have used Linux packages such as apt or yum, you know that you can run a yum install command with the name of the library, and it will install that library for you. Wouldn't that be nice if you could also do that with MicroStrategy? So Helm is what makes that possible. Helm is a package manager for Kubernetes. Helm charts allow you to define, install, and upgrade MicroStrategy application. So you can run Helm install MicroStrategy, and it will install MicroStrategy for you. Now, in a typical deployment, you have different configurations for your dev, staging, and prod environment. For example, you want a container, a database container for your dev environment, but in a production environment, you want something more highly available, such as RDS, Postgres from AWS. So you can certainly do that with Helm. So when you install MicroStrategy application, you can run Helm install MicroStrategy, overriding the configurations for that. Now, the reason why we chose Kubernetes is so that we can consistently run MicroStrategy application regardless of where it's deployed, whether it's on-prem or whether it's on cloud. As long as we have Kubernetes cluster, we can deploy MicroStrategy. Now, you can certainly create your own Kubernetes and set up your own Kubernetes cluster and configure that, but there are also managed Kubernetes services provided by most major cloud providers, such as Amazon, Google, Azure, and even for on-prem, you can use Red Hat OpenShift. So with now, if you use managed services, they make it a lot easier for you to manage and upgrade clusters and configure those clusters. And we have a plan to further simplify and automate even the cluster setup process for the MicroStrategy deployment. All right, so now that we talked about the core technologies, let's get back to the Hyper.Now scenario. As I mentioned, that Hyper.Now is built on containers. You are able to quickly get a working environment for you in a matter of seconds. So how does it really work? And how can the same technology power your own MicroStrategy deployment? Now let's talk about Hyper.Now, what happens. So a user starts their journey from Hyper.Now landing page. It calls an API layer, which is called a controller, and the controller has a number of things to do. It checks for the authentication and authorization. So it checks that the user is logged in and whether that user is allowed to deploy the MicroStrategy environment. Now, once it does that, it finds an available Kubernetes cluster. Now, on the right here, I'm showing you one Kubernetes cluster that's made up of number of instances, number of machines. And we can also define that auto scaling for that Kubernetes cluster. So more nodes can be added depending on the demand and depending on the usage. Now, to be able to scale to hundreds or even thousands of environment, we actually have multiple Kubernetes cluster. And that's why this controller's job is to find out an available Kubernetes cluster which has enough capacity. Once it finds that, it calls the environment orchestration layer, which is another API server deployed within that Kubernetes cluster. And its job is to manage the deployment of MicroStrategy within that cluster and also monitors the environments. So once the environment orchestrator receives the request, it reaches out to Helm registry hosted by MicroStrategy to download the Helm charts for MicroStrategy release. And then it runs the Helm install command to start the deployment. And what it's going to do is it's going to download all the containers from the Docker registry and deploy MicroStrategy services such as library, web, platform analytics, and so on. Now the environments are deployed within their own namespace. And what that means is, so namespace is a logical grouping of the deployment. Consider that as a tag. So now using that name, we can actually apply rules and policies. One example would be we can apply the security policy so that we can restrict the network traffic between the environments. So we can say that environment 1 services should not be able to talk to environment 2 services. Now, containers are ephemeral. So anything that you store within the container is lost when the containers get restarted or container crashes. So anything that we need to persist, it has to be persisted in an external storage. So what we use is a network file storage. And all of your configuration files for MicroStrategy or the cubes and caches for iServer or your database data is going to be stored in that persistent storage. So when your container crashes or gets restarted, we can reattach that volume and you don't lose the data. And this also makes it a lot easier to upgrade your containers, because now you can swap out the container with a newer version of the container and then reattach the volume, and your application is up and running. Now for Hyper.Now, we also have centralized logging and monitoring. The way it works is we have a Fluentd agent that's running within the cluster, which collects all the logs from all the environments and sends that to a centralized database, Elasticsearch, so that we can query and search for those logs. And we also have alerts set up so that we can actually look for errors in the errors for the application. We can look for crashes, and we can look for login failures, and so on. And when that happens, a Slack message is sent to the team who is managing that, and someone can quickly react to it, and support can get involved and fix the issue. Now, this logging architecture also supports sending the logs to a cloud provider specific services such as AWS CloudWatch. Once your environment is up and running, you can now access the environment using one of the MicroStrategy clients, such as Workstation, Library Mobile. Now let's talk about why containers. There are a number of reasons why we chose containers for our Hyper.Now offering. First one is speed. With containers, there is no operating system to start up. Means your applications are up and running a lot faster. Portability. I mentioned that we are using Kubernetes cluster, and that Kubernetes cluster can be anywhere, whether it's on cloud or on-prem, and we can deploy MicroStrategy application in that. With containers, it also provides standardization. Now you all heard that from developers that it works on my machine, or I could not reproduce this issue. It doesn't happen with containers because developers are building and running the software the same way that QAs will be running the software, or that the same way that you will be deploying the application in the production environment, because the environment is always going to be that consistent environment. Now the developers can focus on business logic rather than worrying about the underlying operating system, the underlying application server, or any other customization that might have been done on their operating system. Next one is scalability. With containers, you are able to horizontally or vertically scale your application within a matter of seconds. You can change the resource quota for your containers to increase the memory or CPU limit, or you can increase the replica count so that you can have more instances of library, more instances of iServer to provide the highly available solution. Efficiency. With containers, there is less operating system overhead, which means the improved virtual machine density. And what that means is that containers are lightweight. You can actually deploy multiple MicroStrategy environments in a single machine based on your utilization, and that improves the efficiency. Ease of upgrade. Now, I briefly mentioned that in the earlier slide when I talked about the architecture. But with containers, the upgrade can be as easy as swapping the containers with the newer version. So if there are security patches that we need to apply, we can create a new container image for that service, and we can swap it out. Now, of course, there might be some configurations that we may have to run on that, but it's a lot easier than your traditional deployment model. Reliability. Kubernetes container orchestration system is responsible for ensuring that your application is always running. So if your application, if your service crashes, Kubernetes will restart them, essentially providing self-healing capabilities. If you have defined a number of replicas, for example, if you have defined 2 instances of library, then Kubernetes will make sure that those 2 instances are always running. Security. This is an important one. Application resources are isolated, providing better security. Now, if you have defined proper privileges for containers, containers will have no access or limited access to the underlying operating system. And I also talked about network isolation. With containers, you can apply the security policy so that you can have a multi-tenant system. So environment 1 resources cannot talk to the resources from environment 2. Next one is reduced cost. Now this goes with efficiency. Because you are better able to utilize the resources more effectively, it reduces the overall infrastructure cost. Now, depending on your usage pattern, you can actually increase the number of nodes for your system, or you can decrease it down when the load goes away, and which improves the cost. So that now we talked about the container benefits, I will hand it over to Shreyas to further talk about the deployment options with MicroStrategy and the roadmap ahead.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jed. That was brilliant. Great insights on the architecture and how our Hyper.Now platform works. So where does that leave us, right? So we still have our customer managed and MicroStrategy managed offerings. I spoke about the three offerings before. We have now added the .now platform to the suite. Um, Currently, recently, we just released Hyper.Now, but I envision more offerings coming your way in the following quarters. Along with this, we also envision releasing MicroStrategy on cloud with the support for containers. So we think that with all the learnings that we got from our development with the .now platform, it could be easily portable into any of the cloud providers, and this will allow you to deploy MicroStrategy in form of containers. So what is the path forward? Jay mentioned a lot of benefits during his slide, but one of the things that I wanted to brief up upon is with containers, it will provide us to have cloud agnostic deployments. So what does this mean is we will provide a set of charts which you as a customer would be able to use and deploy it in any of the cloud providers, either AWS, Azure, Google, or as a matter of fact, if you have OpenShift or any other Kubernetes providers, the deployment model will be repeatable across. Same with upgrades. We have heard a lot of we've gotten a lot of feedback from the customers that upgrade is not straightforward with MicroStrategy, but with the help of containers, we can make the upgrade process repeatable across multiple operating system as well as consistent with on-prem as well as in cloud. Along with this, migration, another key aspect. If you want to migrate from one MicroStrategy version to another, right now you have to go through procure hardware, create a parallel system, and install MicroStrategy. That could take months. But with containers, what you could do is if you have in your production system running MicroStrategy container, you can just package it up with all the dependencies along with the MicroStrategy application, ship it to a different cloud, and you can just turn up the container on your Kubernetes, and you're all set. So this is one of a key benefits that we think that will help customers having a good MicroStrategy deployment experience as well as migration experience. Along with this, scaling, which has been another challenge with MicroStrategy. For example, if you want to scale one library server to multiple library servers, you have to install operating system, put Tomcat on it, and then, or if you're in AWS, you would have to create an auto scaling group, make sure you have all the AMIs and everything set up so that when you auto scale, the AMI comes up and the instance starts up and joins itself to the cluster. With Kubernetes, everything is taken care of by Kubernetes. So you just change one parameter. You can say change the scaling for library from 1 to 4, and within matter of seconds, the library instances or library containers are we have 4 library containers, and they are all clustered together. These are some of the things that we think will really help MicroStrategy in coming years. So we think that with containers, this will be a new normal for MicroStrategy deployments in future. With all the benefits, we see that containers will provide a lot of benefits to customers as well. We've already started working on the containerized platform. You already saw our Hyper.Now platform is containerized. Along with this, we are working with a couple of customers, help them containerize their existing environments. And with all that, we think in the second half of 2021, an EA program will be available for customers to join in, where we'll demo and show what we have done with MicroStrategy and containers. If you still want it today, you can use our Hyper.Now platform. Go to microstrategy.com/hyperintelligence, log in, and within a matter of minutes, you will get a MicroStrategy environment that you can play along with it, create content, share content, connect to your data source, any cloud hosted data source, and start building. All right, that's what we have. Thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate all of you joining us at MicroStrategy World 2021.